Sorry, we should always make sure we're recording. So I got the recording going now. I don't really have any new announcements. So sorry, our start slide is the same thing that it was last time we were together. Please start your camera if it's not started already. There's no reason for you to not, well, unless there's a specific reason, and then you know that you should send that to us. So we are still dealing with slope and slope intercept and all those sort of things, and I think we made it to here, right? Because this is what I had coded for. This is how far we made it, because we were kind of doing some review stuff. So you guys are going to need to help me. I don't think we did this problem yet. Can somebody unmute and tell me if we did this problem? I don't want to waste our time and do it again, but
We can't do it because that's what we're going to do.
all right. So go ahead and write down 4a plus b equals negative 52. And what we're going to do is work to isolate b. Sorry, wait. Reset. We're going to rearrange the equation so b is the independent variable. Now, if we want to review what in the world are we doing, can somebody remind us of what we were talking about last week, what y equals mx plus b is? Just kind of give us a brief overview. Zoe, was that a hand? I can't quite tell.
Yeah.
So you want to give us a review?
Yeah, it's it's the equation to find the slope of a graph or of a line.
It's the equation to find the slope? I think we might want to rephrase that a tiny bit. You're right. You're right on the right topic. We're just saying it kind of weird.
What's the equation to help you figure out what's the slope?
Okay, what is the slope in the standard equation?
The m.
The m, right? So if we want to give ourselves a reminder as we dive into this, when we talk about slope-intercept form, the parent function of that form, and by parent function we mean where other functions come from. You're in middle school, you can figure out what we mean by parent and where things come from. So the parent functions create other functions, but m is our slope. What is x, though? Is x the independent variable or the dependent variable?
Independent.
X is independent. So what that means is the dependent variable is out here isolated. So the dependent variable will equal some manipulation of the independent. And then we said b is our, some people call it our starting point, but what is it technically called?
The y-intercept.
Yeah, the y-intercept. Now we can call it the initial value when x is 0 if you want, but y-intercept is a bit less complicated to say. So I want you to treat this equation like that, y equals mx plus b, except b is different here, right? B is not the y-intercept. B is going to be our independent variable. So b is like our x here. B is like our x here. So I think you guys can see it at the bottom of the screen. My zoom bar might be blocking it, so let me know if it is. But it should be 4a plus b equals negative 52. So if b is our independent variable, do we isolate b or do we isolate a? What's isolated in the parent function? Is the dependent isolated or the independent isolated? The dependent's isolated, right? Sorry, I gotta pull my chat back up so I can see when you guys chat to me. Or when you raise hands or whatever. So yeah, we're gonna isolate the A because if B is going to be our independent, so I'm gonna make a little note out here. B is independent. B is our independent variable. So A is dependent. So isolate A. A is like our Y here. Don't ask me why I write diagonal, even on a paper that has lines going both up and down and left and right. I'm not quite sure. So to isolate A, what do we do to get rid of this B? Yes, we subtract it from both sides. I like those of you who gave the specificness to say both sides. All right, now that we got Rachel coming in, I can send attendance. Rachel, where we been? It's okay. I'm just surprised you're late.
I was waiting in the waiting room for like 10 minutes.
So anytime that seems like it's like you just showed up like 30 seconds ago in my waiting room. So if things seem weird, leave Zoom and come back. And guys, if you have not restarted your computer in a while, not right now. I need to say not right now. But restart your computer. Like totally shut it off and turn it back on. Run updates if it needs to run updates. Guys, some of you, the issue is you haven't restarted your computer in a long time. And like things are backed up. Like your computer's got too much kind of sitting in the back of its brain in a way. You got to shut it completely down and restart it. All right, so we subtract B from both sides. So now we have 4A is negative 52 minus B, or we could say 4A is a negative B plus a negative 52. Either of those would be fine. We could write it either way. Now, what do we do to finish isolating the A by itself?
Divided by 4 on both sides.
Yeah, we're going to divide by 4. Now, everything gets divided by 4. So, guys, this is the trap door. We don't just divide the negative B by 4. We divide the negative 52 by 4 as well. Both of these get divided by 4. So that's going to give us A is, well, okay, so this is really negative 1, right? So negative 1/4 B plus what?
Negative 13.
Yeah, negative 13. Please ask me some questions if anything we just did does not make sense. So our goal here is to isolate the dependent variable, because we're going to say the dependent variable is something of the independent, right? B can do whatever it wants, but A gets its value from whatever B is. We can't figure out what B is without knowing what A is. Or other way around. We can't figure out what A is without knowing what B is. But B can do whatever it wants.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
If this was in coordinates, would A be negative in theory? Or would A have to be negative? I'm just confused because, like...
It would depend on what B is. So,
I'm just
if...
trying to think of, like, what number would physically go in there to make it correct.
There's not just one. So that's where you're getting stuck. You're trying to say there is a right answer. There is not. So check it. If we rewrite this in YX form, right? So instead of using A and B, we replace A, which we said is dependent, with Y. We replace B with X. Are you with me on how I'm allowed to rewrite that like that?
Yes.
So now, if we go into Desmos, handy dandy Desmos, and graph this, negative 1/4 times the X plus a negative 13,
So like would one of the coordinates be like x is -4?
One of the coordinates we for sure know is 0, -13.
Oh.
Now, any of our other answers are just any point on this line. So some points are going to be easier to find than others, but like if I go right here and try to get that actually locked into place, I bet that's 4, -14. Stay. Right there. 4, -14 would be an x and a y that would solve this problem. 5, -15 would also do, or sorry, 6, -14.5. I have no idea what scale my graph is in. So any of these points.
-17 or whatever.
-15, it looks like. Yeah, 8, -15.
Okay, I get it.
So if we make a slope triangle here, guys, we go down by 1, we go over by 4. We go down by 1, over by 4. Even though these are actually halves, if I zoom out a little bit, it'll turn to ones. There we go. Now the boxes are 1. Down by 1, over by 4. Down by 1, over by 4. Other questions? Thank you very much for that, Kelly. I appreciate that question. Other questions on that relationship between A and B? Because you know
I had a question about that, but you're just using the Desmos graphing calculator for that, right?
Yep, when you go to Desmos, you just click graphing calculator. So, try these on your own. I'm going to give you a few minutes. I'm probably actually going to give you 5 minutes. Let's do this. In Zoom, use the thumb up when you're done, when you've got all 3 of these. If you can't start on any of these, you should be asking me a question, whether it's in chat or like unmute and ask. But like if you can't solve this, you should be asking me a question. Remember, we isolate the dependent variable. I'm watching the chat to see if anybody sends me anything to help. So in the first one, what variable are we going to isolate? Yeah, the M. We want to get M as in like mom. We want to get M alone. Because N, as in not mom, is the independent. Right? So N is the independent. Isolate the M. Be careful when you do that division that you're spreading that division across every value that needs divided. The first one, you should have gotten M equals, anyone want to shout it out?
4 plus 2 times n.
Yeah, either way. right? Both ways, like the two different things that you guys just said are both right. Either 4 plus 2/3 n, which is fine. We can write it like that. Or, if we want to flip it around to the way that we are used to, 2/3 n plus 4. Very good. Anybody have any questions on that one? See, I normally do squiggly lines because now it bothers me that my line got off down here. It was pretty good up until the bottom. All right, try the second one. If B is independent, what do we want to isolate? A. And make sure we simplify as far as we can. So you can't just say, oh, to get the A by itself, I just add 7 and we're done. Nope, not done. We can add 7, but we're not done then. So I'm going to pull this back down and do my work. Crap. When I add 7, do I add it in the parentheses so I can add it with the 2? Yeah, I got Ivan shaking his head. So I add it just like out on the end? Do I just like stick it out here?
Why don't you distribute it first and then add it?
Ah, now we wouldn't have to distribute first. If I forgot to distribute and I'm working in a pen. So if we distributed first, we'd have 3b plus 6, but I didn't distribute first. So we could write 3b, or 3 times the quantity b plus 2, plus 7, right? We could just throw it on the end, and then we could distribute, and we get 3b plus 6 plus 7. Which, what do I need to do now?
You add 6 and 7.
Yeah, add the 6 and the 7 to get
A equals 3b plus 13.
questions on that. Be careful with the negative in the third one over here. So let's go ahead and try to not make that same mistake here. Let's distribute first if we can. Right? So we can. We know how to do -2 times these numbers. Making sure that we distribute to both terms inside the parentheses. Hannah, what do I do now? I'm just picking on you because your camera's all messed up. What do I do to get the m by itself?
Add minus 1 from each side.
Yeah, thank you very much. We -1 from each side.
About n, not about m.
Sorry, what was that, Adam?
Isn't the last one about n, not about m?
You are correct that n is the independent variable. So be careful because you were away from your computer for a second. I think you were taking care of your dog or something. But remember, when we come back up here and we talk about what is independent versus dependent, the dependent gets isolated. The independent actually ends up on the other side with all of the other numbers. So if n, right, n is the independent, it stays over here with the other numbers. M needs to be gotten alone because m would be our dependent. Does that make a little bit more sense?
Yeah, it feels incorrect that the dependent should be alone, and that the independent has all the numbers next to it.
So think of it like this. I hire you to come rake leaves in my yard. The amount of pay you get is dependent on how many bags of leaves you rake. I'm going to pay you $5 per bag of leaves. So the pay that you get is dependent pay is dependent on how many bags. If you wimp out and say, I'm not doing it, you get nothing. If you just rake a few and say, here, 3 bags, I'm done, you get $15. If you're like me 2 weeks ago and you get 18 bags of leaves raked up, I'm not joking, it was a mess, I'd pay you $90, except I'm broke and I'm not paying anybody, I'm doing the work myself. So does this make sense? Like pay would be dependent, but the independent thing is how many bags you decide to rake. You can independently decide how many bags you decide to rake. But what I pay you depends on how much you rake. That is why we isolate the dependent. -2n minus 13, I believe, then. Questions, comments, or concerns on that content? I feel like we all need to take a stretch. I feel like 3 of us are stretching at the same time at least. Take my mask off. I'm all alone in the pod today, guys. No other teachers are here.
Are there any other teachers even in the school?
Oh, yeah. We all just kind of work on different days. And not like intentionally, just my Tuesdays, Thursdays are my heavy days. I have a class in the morning and I have 2 classes in the afternoon. And I do math lab. All right, these ones are harder. More work to be done here. So stepping up our challenge. I got to flip to a new piece of paper. Let's... Oh, we didn't even do this last time. I'm going to mute myself here in a moment. When you are done solving both, give me the thumbs up on... in Zoom, right? When you're done solving both, give me the Zoom thumbs up.
The one in the participant list, or like the one that goes in the camera?
There isn't one on the participant list anymore. Or on this Zoom one.
I don't know. Whatever one you have available. Or you can type in the chat, done, if you want, or whatever. Just somehow tell me that you're done. In the first one, what should we be isolating? The R. Like a pirate. R. Guys, it's absolutely fine if you make a mistake. Please don't sit here and do nothing because you're scared of making a mistake. It's totally fine if you get this wrong. We're doing it together for that reason. Just try it on your own. Don't just sit here and do nothing. Now, wait a minute. You guys are done with both? Because I just got done with one. It's all right if you raised your hand or whatever, but man, that's fast if you're done with both. In the second one, what should we be isolating? R again, right? If Q is independent, we'll isolate R again. if we're following my bias, what would be the first step in the second problem? If we're working to isolate R, and we have a positive R on one side and a negative R on the other side,
Get rid of the negative.
get rid of the negative if possible. Right, guys? So when I look at this problem, what I'm thinking is I want R by itself. I've got positive R and I've got negative R. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of negative values if possible. So that's going to be our first step there. Well, it doesn't have to be, but it's a good first step. If we did that as our first step, what should be the second step?
Adding 7 on both sides.
Adding 7?
7Q.
Yeah, adding 7Q. Wait a minute. There's no extra number in this one. What does that tell us? What do we know about Q and R since there's no extra number? Yeah, it's proportional. You guys are awesome. So we'll come back to the first one. But if I divide by 16, I think, tell me if I made a mistake in my work, I get 10/16 Q, which I could write as 5/8 Q. Sorry, my Q's have always looked kind of funky. I think it's because I learned how to write in cursive, and cursive Q's are weird and whatever. So in the first one, unless I made a mistake, I got 3Q plus 2/3. Do we agree? Or did I mess it up? All right, those of you that did not work quite as fast, well, totally fine. Do we have any questions? Zoe?
Could you rewrite it as 3Q plus 2/3 equals R?
Absolutely. So that's what I got at first. And then I turned it around to put the R on the left-hand side. I just pick up the whole thing and flip the whole thing around. On our second one, because I know my little extra video thing might be in the way. I can't tell what you guys actually see or not. Can you guys see my little picture-in-picture video? Oh, now it disappeared. Do you see that picture-in-picture video?
Yeah, it's like weird and like see-through, yeah.
Yeah, it's like semi-transparent. Yeah, sorry,
It
it's
just
because
went away. Oh, now it's back.
it's because I'm recording class. Yeah, it's my two different cameras. So when we add 4R, it's nice because we get just a positive R amount. When we add the 7Q to get rid of the negative 7Q, it's nice because we get a positive Q amount. I just think of Q from 007. Then we divide by 16 to get R by itself. We get 10/16 Q. Because we don't have an extra number out here, we know that this one is proportional. That's kind of cool. It is proportional. Not that like we were asked, is it proportional or not, but it, you know, it's kind of convenient to recognize. Questions on those two? Now, Adam, to loop back to your question, because it's been kind of simmering in my brain, the independent variable can be isolated. Like, we could isolate the Q, right? We would just do the work the other way around. And like here in the proportional relationship, we would actually just use the reciprocal, and we'd say Q is 8, like Q would be equal to 8/5 R. That is also true. Like, we could write Q is equal to 8/5 R. That would also be true. But since Q is the independent, we pick what Q is. And then we like would have to do more math to solve for R. Up here, if we pick what Q is, we just have, the math is already, like, we're already told what to do. We already know what to do. We do 5/8 times whatever we picked. That will get the dependent variable. So I know it's kind of weird that we don't isolate the independent, because it seems like independent would be alone, but that is not what we do. All right, so functions. Have you ever heard the word functions before, aside from, like, if you've worked ahead in your Khan Academy homework? Did your 6th grade teachers ever talk to you about functions? Okay, I need to figure out a way to, I can't tell if these hands are, I'm going to lower everybody's hands real quick. And then, if you want to put a hand up. But, all right, so Sebastian, I think that's a new hand. Do you know something about functions for us?
Yeah, my dad basically talked about it.
Ooh, okay, what? So,
It was about grammar. So,
oh, that's probably slightly different, but I mean, go ahead and tell us if you want.
I mean, honestly, I forget it, but I know it's about a conjunction, which I didn't talk much about.
Yeah, conjunction, junction, what's your function? That's Schoolhouse Rock. So, functions, mathematically speaking, use an input. Sorry, Akshay?
We talked about this last Thursday, but a function takes an input and creates an output.
Yeah, we use an input to determine an output. Our input is the independent variable. So the way that I remembered that was the input is the independent. The input is the independent. So instead of writing y equals mx plus b, we start to say, instead of y, we say f of x. A function of x is equal to some number times x plus some other number. So where we're used to saying y equals is going to start becoming f of x. My computer's about to die. I don't know where my charger is. This is a bad... Let me see if I can get you started on another problem and then find my charger. All right, check this out. What do you think about this function? I don't know why I lost my computer charger. This is not good. There you are.
I was gonna say stick your finger in the charging port and then stick your other finger in the outlet.
I mean, if I drink enough coffee, maybe. Might electrify
Or stick a
myself.
fork in both and hold both the forks.
Now, we unfortunately are not getting to do Phoenix Fair, at least now. Hey, Dewan. I don't know if your camera's just in a different spot than where you are, but you look totally off task. So just FYI,
No, my paper is right here, so I'm right here. with
you're
my
good.
stuff.
I could just see the light on your face, and I couldn't tell if it was because, like, other kids' screens are changing or if you're watching Netflix.
I have LEDs and stuff in my room.
Oh, I forgot about that. We've been through this whole thing. We've had this conversation before. My bad, dude. All right, thank you very much. I heard you and Mr. Estes might hook you up with some stuff, so if you want to hang out on the Zoom afterwards, you could. I was talking with Estes about that today. But all right, we're going to try to wrap up in the next 5 minutes, guys, so stick with me for just 5 more minutes. Functions are often used for companies to be able to model out what we call projections. So if you've ever heard about like a new business startup, or anyone ever like heard about Kickstarter, Kickstarter is like a website where you can go support like independent kind of initiatives, like be it a board game or something like that. So this line is modeling the function of Jada selling ground paprika. Her weekly profit in dollars, that's the y-axis. So that's like our dependent, right? Profit will depend on how much she sells. So let's go ahead and write down profit will depend on sales, right? So profit, and I'm going to put Jada so we remember who we're talking about. Jada's profit, I don't know why I capitalized profit, will depend on sales. Now, sales are independent of profit. We do not need to have made a profit to sell something, right? A person comes up, I sell it to them. So if we were to look at what is shown to us by the graph, way back here, way down yonder, there is some y-intercept that if that gray bar drops away, we can make a guess of where it is. I might bump that graph up just a tiny bit. So we can see that a little bit better. Where would you approximate that y-intercept is? This is a weird slope. We could. It's like over negative 250, right? Like negative 275, maybe.
Around negative.
Yeah, like around negative 280.
275.
So that's a little bit hard to determine, and if we figure out the slope, we could determine it. But actually, none of that matters to answer the question that it asks. If Jada sells 60 kilograms of paprika, well, this axis must be kilograms, right? The thing that's independent is how much does she sell. Does Jada make profit or lose money? Makes profit. How much?
$200.
Yeah, so when Jada sells 60 kilograms, so we could say 60 kilograms of sales equals $200 profit. Man, if we wanted to figure out the slope there, we would need another good point.
35.
Ooh, so if we wanted to compare 35, 0, and what that point that we just set up here, 60 and 200, well, 200s are a y, so 60 and 200. So our change in y that always goes on top, what's our change in y?
200.
Thank you. What's our change in x to go from 35 to 60? Yeah, whispering makes it seem intense, right? Oh, we can simplify that. What's 200 divided by 25? 8. What would that tell us in this situation? If m is a 8 what? Okay, 8 over 1. We could write 8 over 1. That's, yeah, I agree. We don't really need the over 1, but you're absolutely right. What was our 200? What label would attach with that? Dollars. What was the 25? So what label should we have on the 8?
So would it be like for every dollar just makes $8?
$8 per kilogram. So here our slope in context, like in the problem, right? In the context of this problem, our slope tells us how much she makes for 1 kilogram. Remember, we've talked about our slope is really our unit rate as well. Now, we could actually use that slope to determine the y-intercept, but we don't need to here. I would like to do one more problem instead. Zane, unfortunately, is way down in a volcano when he hears some rumbling. So he decides it's time to climb out. So Zane's elevation relative to the edge of the inside of the volcano in meters as a function of time, so that tells us time is our x value, is modeled right here. Where does Zane start? That's not the question they're asking, but that's the question I'm asking. Yeah, 25 meters down, right? Where does Zane end, at least from the graph that we see? Yeah, at 0 meters, right? At the top of the volcano. So if we think about slope in this situation, well, change in y over change in x, right? M is always change in y over change in x. So if we want, well, what's our change in y? If we make a big triangle here, big slope triangle, what's our change in y?
You go up 25 and to the right of 35.
Now 25 what? Meters
Yes.
in 35 seconds. So when we simplify this, what can 25 and 35 both divide by?
5.
And instead of writing meters on top and seconds on bottom, we literally just make that our label of everything. Meters per second. I mean, or you could say he climbed 5 meters in 7 seconds. But if we want to talk about the unit rate, it is literally 5/7 meters per 1 second. So we could write the unit rate as 5/7 of a meter in 1 second. But that seems kind of silly to put a fraction over 1. It's just unnecessary. So instead, we show that in our label using the word per to make it our rate, right? A rate is always a comparison between two values. So guys, here's what tends to confuse people, and this is where I'm going to end the lesson. This has a 7 on the bottom. And normally people will say, well, Mr. Hudson, you said for a unit rate, we have to have 1 on the bottom. You're right. But any number can have a 1 on the bottom. So if we wanted to turn 5/7 into a fraction over 1, how do I turn 7 into 1? Oh, we divide by 7. Okay, so on top I would do the same thing. We would get 5/7. That's why once we have our fraction simplified, that's our unit rate. We just say per 1 second in the label, because instead of putting it over top of 1 actual second, because that's kind of silly, we just say it in the label. So please do not think that all because this has a 7 on the bottom that it can't be your unit rate. It's your unit rate because it's that many meters 1 second. Any questions? Please hang out. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, guys. Thank you so much for a great class. Bye. We will pick up here next time. Thank you. You guys are awesome.